everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of season 3 of the Woke Mommy Chatter podcast. This is the last episode for 2018. I feel like 2018 has been a trek. So I just the fact that we're here is amazing and yay. Before we get into the show, just a reminder to head over to the Woke Mommy Chatter website. It's www.wokemommychatter.com to help support the podcast. So your support means that I can put together more than 8 episodes each year and maybe even hire an editor to help get the podcast out on time. I am juggling this and interviews along with kids and a full-time job that is really demanding and a whole bunch of, and a husband, everything that everyone else has going on. So it's a lot. So any kind of support is welcome. If you want to come babysit for me, please offer. You can do that too. This has been an insanely busy year for me. My head has been down. I have been in a tunnel and it's just, I haven't come up for air. So it's been a crazy, crazy year, but I am looking forward to 2019 and everything that has in store and you know, the places this podcast can go and the ways in which it can grow. So on this episode, I wanted to do kind of not a year in review so much, but a bit of a reflective episode. For those of you who are, I guess, longtime listeners, if you listen to season 1, I did an interview with someone by the name of Bellamy Shoffner. Bellamy is from Charlottesville. She spoke to me in season 1 about the Charlottesville riots. She talked about homeschooling, and she also talked about starting her own magazine called Hold the Line, which is really it's a work of art basically about activism and combining that with parenthood. So I had the opportunity to touch base with her and talk about where she's at. And I just need to say, on a personal level, there are people that kind of inspire you. And Bellamy is one of the people that kind of inspires me. And when I feel like I don't want to do this podcast anymore or too much on me and too much pressure, and just I think about her and all the wonderful things she's doing, and I get inspired to continue. So Hold the Line, the magazine that you started. So the last time we spoke, I think you were just working on the very first issue, and it was going to be coming out soon. And since then, 4 issues, am I right?
There have been 3 issues, and there's one more on the way.
Right. So what's it been like over the last year, putting that together? Like, what have been some of the highs? Well, what have been some of the low points? And then we'll end on a high.
The low points, I think the first one, I was operating with this sort of adrenaline, and I don't think I realized that it was taking me probably a couple hundred hours or something like that to get it finished. And so by the second one, because of the first one, I'd been offered a job, and so I took this part-time job. Then I had my kids, and so trying to get the second one done was extremely difficult, just with time management. And it was the LGBTQ issue. And so also my own education and sort of weeding out the writers who were being irresponsible with the content they were producing. That was really difficult and led to some arguments with some of the writers. And then overall, I think it's been largely positive, but that was probably the hardest time, was just getting that second issue done.
So I always say, like, the magazines that you produce, the issues are so beautiful. Like, they're just visually, like, they're works of art. And when I see them, that's what I think of, right? Like, just looking at them, right? The content is a whole other thing, and the content is fantastic and great, but just looking at it visually, I think they're beautiful. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, when you say it took hundreds of hours, like, I can understand that, because you could see the level of dedication to putting it together. What are so you talked about the lows, which I found really interesting. So I think one of the things I'm interested in is how we grow as, like, progressive people, right? And how we have our own blind spots too. So LGBTQ, or I think here we're saying like
Yes.
LGBT2SQ, like two
Hmm.
spirited. That's an area where even like for me, I think that I have a lot of growing to do and just in my understanding. And so I appreciate that you've kind of said the same thing, right? Like building your knowledge in particular areas around like equity.
Hmm.
So how did you do that? And then how did you have those difficult conversations with people to say, you know what, like this is not the level of this is not the discourse that I want to bring in my
Right.
magazine.
It was such a process. It was almost like walking up a flight of stairs, where I felt like I would read a couple of submissions or essays and I would learn a little bit and question a little bit. And then I would read more and I would go to different websites and I educated myself otherwise. And I talked to my friends. And that issue, there are contributions from at least three or four of people that I know personally and that I consider friends. And through the conversations with them and reading their pieces, as they were pretty responsible with what they were presenting, I was able to learn more. And I think it really just boils down to being open minded, right? And just assuming, not assuming that I don't know, that I do know everything, and assuming that I don't know everything, and being open and
Mm-hmm.
understanding that for one, we group them together with this acronym, but there are so many identities and so many variations and so many different types of people, and that's generally true always. And so we can't let the label LGBTQ um, define each individual person. And so I have to take each story individually, and each interaction individually. And at one point, I'd gotten into a debate over some pretty heavy edits because I felt like the author of the article, whose identity I didn't know anything about personally, I felt like she was being insensitive to the trans community, and her because her article was about a trans person. And so it was I at first I didn't notice, right? And so it's like you don't know until you know, and then when you know, you can see it. And so
Mm-hmm.
at first I didn't really see it, and then I went back again, and I was like, oh wait, like this is not quite right. Some of these things are not quite right, and they were subtle, and they and maybe some people would have seen them nitpicky. Maybe some people wouldn't even have noticed. But I felt like she was using the wrong terminology. She was using some damaging comparisons about being trans. And so we just got into there was just an email debate, but also there's no debate, right? Like, I'm not going to publish something that's going to hurt other people. That completely goes
Mm-hmm.
against the whole point. So there actually is
Mm-hmm.
no debate. It's not that I can't, like I said, I'm learning from everybody at the same time, but there's also a hard line when things are wrong and things are offensive.
I like that you said that there's a hard line. Like I'm beginning to, I'm not that I didn't feel that way before, but I'm beginning more and more now um, to feel like there really is a hard line. Like there's no gray area when it
No.
comes to doing what's right. And I mean, we say equity and we kind of throw that word around, but it's just it's treating people fairly and doing what's right. There's no gray area, right? Like
Right.
it's when someone says, "Oh, yeah, you know, I someone said something racist," and I really felt like that was such a wrong thing to say, but I didn't speak up. I mean, there's no gray. Why didn't you speak up?
Right.
Speak
There is
up,
no gray
right? Like
area.
there's no gray area there,
Right.
right? So I and I love that you take that approach with your magazine to maintain the integrity of it, but also to make sure that you're not harming anyone. What were some of the highs over the past year with Hold the
Oh my
Line?
goodness. I don't even know. That's so hard to quantify. Hold the Line has been all over the world. There are subscribers from all over the world, in every state in the United States, which is so cool and incredible. And there's not necessarily a ton of people, but there are lots of people that are interested, and it's a beautiful thing. I get a lot of positive feedback and a lot of thank yous, which I think is funny because you do this type of work starting with wanting to protect your family and your kids, right? And so you do this type of work first, thinking
Mm-hmm.
about what can I do to ensure that the world is better for my children as they grow up? So people thanking me, I think, is very kind. But I also feel like I need to thank them for just being interested and being willing to learn along with me. Recently, as a follower invited me and a guest to go see Michelle Obama in DC, which was awesome. It wasn't like a, not, it was the book tour. It wasn't like a personal event or anything, but it was the book
Oh my
tour.
God.
And
I want followers like that. Can someone invite me to just.
I,
I'm just putting it out there. Anyway.
yes, invite. Come on, y'all. Yeah, I think, and then that was the night that Barack Obama showed up. I don't know if he's been there to other
Oh
nights of our
my
book tour, but he was
God.
there, and so I mean, that happened just a couple weeks ago, and it was incredible. I don't even think I've fully processed it yet. But in addition to that, I've been able just to connect with so many people on a new level.
Well, you've done some other things too. I think you're being really modest. So you held a retreat,
Oh
right, for
yeah,
women.
yep, yep.
Yeah, and that, I mean, it's I would think that that's, even if it's not like a direct connection, like that's part of a result, partially of Hold the Line too, right?
Yeah.
And also, and you talked about like your job, which you got because of the magazine, and then I remember having a conversation with you about the authors, like the like a book festival kind of that you were putting on.
Oh yes,
I'm probably calling it the wrong thing,
yes.
but
Well, no, there is a so the place where I work holds the local book festival or the statewide book festival. And when I yes, when I was there, I had all of these really intense and inspirational interactions with these authors that I maybe even didn't necessarily know before, but knew then and started to really admire. And it was really it was very powerful, and I just ended up in a place that I where I wouldn't have been, and just I had no reason to end up there, but that's where I ended up. And so even meeting Tayari Jones and driving her to the airport and getting, you know, 10 or 15 minutes of free writing advice and just coaching from she was the Oprah's book club writer for I guess for 2018 or before. I'm not sure how that works, but either way, she's a really big deal. So uh,
what's the name of her most recent
An
book?
American Marriage. So, yeah, talking with her, and there's a poet, a Pulitzer Prize winning poet, Tayamba Jess, and I talked to him for a few minutes, and he said, "You must be a poet." And so, there were
Oh,
all these really cool interactions.
someone said something recently. Actually, it was, oh my God, it was my daughter, like the dance school she goes to, the owner of the dance school was talking, and he like just said the most profound thing to me, which was that he was talking about Black people and us not taking the opportunities that come our way because we're in like protective mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're like, oh, that's too stressful. I don't want to be a manager, or I don't want to do that. It's just too much work, which I say a lot. And so he was just talking about how when you put yourself out there, when you do things, like just opportunities just come to you. And that's like, it reminded me of you. And I thought about that. And I think it's such, like, you're such a good example of that, right? Like, you just do something, like you said, you create it because, um, you want to do something to make the world a better place for your family. But it becomes so much more than that, right?
Sure, definitely. And I try to never turn down an opportunity. And not even just when they
Yeah.
sort of come to me, but also when I hear about something that I might be interested in. And I don't know that I was always that way. Um, but I feel like I'm in a space right now in life where that's a necessity. It's just knowing, like, I just say yes. I say yes, and I'll figure it out, and hope for the best, and do my best, and just see what happens.
So that reminds me of Shonda Rhimes, like the year of
Oh
yes,
yes.
like where she just said yes to everything. And I need to do that because I'm a no person. I'm like a no, I can't do it. No, 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 I don't want to do it. Right? How do you how do you make room for everything? If you're saying yes, how
Mm.
do you make room for everything?
I don't think I do. One of the things I do that is kind of tough sometimes is that I turn down invites to things where I don't have to be. So, and sometimes it makes me feel a little bit selfish, but it's sort of self preservation. Like if I have to be moderating an event and making a magazine and working this job and raising my kids and doing all these other things, then I'm probably not going to go to the event that I'm not moderating, right? Or like I'm probably not going to go to see a panel that I don't have to be on, which is, it's like I said, it's unfortunate. And I do try to like Facebook Live stuff, and so I can keep up with what other people are doing and support other people. But that's sort of one of the most tangible ways I can say, okay, like this is where I draw the line. Because you could be at an event or a talk or something like that every night of the week, right? And you could, always be trying to see a documentary somewhere or an art show. Like there's never ending things that you could be doing and that you might be invited to. So just knowing that I have to draw the line there is important. And then, I mean, otherwise, I feel like I don't always do it all well, and I try to relieve myself of some of the guilt. And I try to remind myself, especially as a parent, that taking the time to do these things, I hope, is one, setting a really good example for my kids, and two, allowing them to see that I'm a well-rounded person outside of my responsibilities and my love for them.
So we do all this work, and then, I mean, people are consuming it, right? And there's a lot of, I mean, you have to be thankful for that, right? Like you put something out there, and the hope is that it speaks to someone. But one of the questions that I think you'd asked, which I've thought about too, is like when it comes to the audience, when it comes to consumption of this kind of work, so work by Black women, Black artists, Black whatever, are we giving too much of ourselves away to white people? And so I've thought about that, and I think two things. I think first, just by the nature of who we are and where we are, we don't have a choice. The audience is always, there will always be, the audience will always be white because it's a majority, right?
Right.
But I think is more important is who, as a creator, who your intended audience is, right? And I know for me, the work I do, and whenever I write, I'm writing for Black women. I'm writing for Black mothers, right? Like that's who I think about.
Right.
I'm not thinking, if I know that, when I look at the people who follow me, there are like a lot of white people who follow me, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think that's wonderful. And I hope they get something out of it. I hope, it helps enrich their life and enrich the way in which they interact with, Black women or Black families. But my audience, for me, I'm telling these stories, and I'm hoping to share any little piece of knowledge that I have and learn from, Black women. That's who my audience is. And I've heard, like, not that I'm in the same category, but I've heard like Issa Rae say this about the fact that when they did a breakdown of the audience for Insecure, it's like a lot of white people watch Insecure, right? And I think like the response was, well, yeah, but it's not for them. So yeah,
right.
They can consume it and watch it, but the intent is not. It was created for like Black millennials or whoever, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing with rap and hip hop music. Like the consumption of rap and hip hop music, like is very white,
right.
but it's not created for
them.
them,
Right.
right? They just happen to consume it, but it's not for you. But that's okay. So yeah, that's kind of what I think of that. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think I mean that is what I admire about you, is that I feel like you're so very clear about who your audience is, and not making any apologies for it. I really think that is it's powerful, and it's a personality or trait of intention that I do not possess. I am I wish that my audience were more inclusive of the of all people, and I do notice that my audience skews white, and I am grateful for every person that is involved in interacting and like helping with our community drives and events and all of that. But I do just wish I had more Black people interested. And that's just, I think, the nature of being proud of your culture and wanting to bring your people along with you. Um, so, but I feel like I also have sort of placed myself more in that position of like, I think that your appeal is that you're, unapologetic about it. And you're just like, if you're listening to me, this is what you're going to hear. And so people are getting that. So maybe white people are getting that sort of raw insight that they may not get otherwise. That's beneficial to all of us if they have that insight and if they have that knowledge. Um, but me, I'm just like, everybody get on board and everybody get right. Like it's sort of, it's sort of very open, in a way that doesn't always lend itself to me really having any idea, who I'm reaching or why. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, it's sort of just like, this is for people. Particularly parents maybe or educators, but this is for people.
And I think that's okay. Like, I think that's part of the beauty of Hold the Line, right? And it's the fact that it is for people means that anyone can kind of connect to it, and you're not limiting your audience. Whereas I feel, I mean, when I look at my audience too, yeah, it totally skews white. It's majority white, I'd say. Like, there are a lot of Black women and men that you'll see sometimes, but it does skew very white. But I feel like I shouldn't have to change my tone,
right?
Because it does. And I think part of it for me is that I spend so long doing that, right? Like, watching what you say and packaging who you are, your experience, in a moderated way, in a way that's neat,
right,
for colleagues, for friends, right, who are not Black. And I feel like it does a disservice to progression. Like, how can we move forward if I'm not honest about the fact that my daughter draws herself as white?
Right. Yeah.
Like, how can things change if we're only having those conversations in the Black community? So I think
the understanding that if we only are talking about these things within the Black community, then it's limiting progress. I think that's something that we both feel. And so we're both going about it in different ways, and there's different intentions, but that core value is still there.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I've talked about this a lot, but a real piece of that for me, and the reason why I'm so intentional about saying this is for Black women, or I'm a Black mother, this is about Black mothers, is because I feel like Black women, Black moms are erased from conversations. We're not there. And, we are, there's just no value. Like, I think Viola
Davis.
Davis. Davis. Let's say Viola. I was gonna say Viola Desmond, who is a Black Canadian woman. She's basically our Rosa Parks in Canada. I was gonna say Viola Desmond, but it's Viola Davis, and she said that if she wasn't famous as a dark-skinned Black woman, she would be invisible.
Wow.
And I thought,
I saw that. Yep.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that's true. And so, again, like, that's part of what, like, why I felt this real need to do this. But I think part of your question as well, in terms of, are we giving too much of ourselves, were you thinking about, like, in terms of that voyeurism of Black lives as the commodification of Black lives, like, or as kind of like entertainment, like Black pain as entertainment?
I think,
is that what you were thinking?
Oh,
too?
I hadn't even thought about that, but I think that is also a problem. I think for me, it's almost very like, what's the word? It's sort of a literal statement, I think. Like, if the majority of my readers are white, and sometimes they reach out to me and ask for personal questions, or they ask for free
Mm-hmm.
issues of the magazine, but for not necessarily out of need. Which, by the way, if somebody expresses need, I always accommodate that, and that's never an issue. But just sort of, what are these expectations? Or in my Facebook group, when I say something that is in opposition to the original poster, the poster gets upset and leaves. And they will even usually say, like,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you for this space, and then still leave. And I'm never rude, I'm never unkind. There was one woman where I felt like she was being insulting to people who had their kids in school because she was a homeschooler, and I told her that she was being insensitive to all the parents whose kids go to school, and she left the Facebook group. I'm a homeschooler, right? Like, she never even stopped
Mm-hmm.
to question or
Mm-hmm.
wonder, but she immediately took offense. And it's sort of, for me, it's like, what is your expectation? What do you want me to be? Because I'm not here for you. I'm here, for me and for my
Mm-hmm.
family, and to do the things that I know to
Mm-hmm.
be right. And that's going to be true whether it upsets you or not. And then just sort of the drawing on my energy, um, that I wonder how much
Yeah.
is too much. And um, we are under the understanding that to get, like, everyone needs to be on board for social change to happen, right? So it's like, where is
Mm-hmm.
the where do we stop, or where do we say, okay, well, that's, you're kind of sucking my energy at this point, and maybe that's not the intended goal.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've experienced that too. I remember talking about adoption, and and my views have changed as well because I'm now working with a project that focuses on the overrepresentation of Black kids in child protective
Mhm.
services, right? And looking at, and when you start doing that, and understanding all of the things that come into play to make that happen, like, you realize, like, there's a huge flaw in the system. There's nothing wrong with Black families, but there's systemic racism and oppression that makes it
Right.
that there are all these Black kids in care who have to be and then there are questions about, well, why do they have to be adopted when they could be placed with kin, or they could be, there's a whole pathology there. And then there's a whole other body of research that looks at transracial adoption and all the problems that
Hmm.
actually arise from transracial adoption, including from children who have been transracially adopted, who now advocate against adoption
Yes, we had some of
altogether.
those in Hold the
And so it's
Line.
not like this stuff. Right, and so this is not like stuff that I'm pulling from the air, saying like, "Oh my God, you adopted a black kid. Like, how could you do that?" I think it's wonderful if people are willing to open their home and adopt children. I think it's a problem when you have so many Black kids in care. You need to look at the roots of the reason, and the roots of the reason are not because the Black community is broken. It goes beyond that. And then the second thing I think is that if you have if if you've got all these Black kids in care and you're looking for homes with them, like, then you need to consider racial matching. And that's not me saying it, that's data
Hmm.
saying it, that's research saying it. That is best practice, right?
Right.
Racial matching is best for children. So I didn't even go into it that deeply. It was just like a loose conversation. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there were a lot of people who were just really upset and saying, I recommended you to other moms who adopted Black
Mm.
kids, and like really just hurt and feeling betrayed. And I thought, well, you know, okay, well, I'm sorry, right?
Right.
Sorry you feel that way. But at the same time, I think you need to be, it shows the limitation in terms of how open people are, I
Hmm.
think, to hearing certain things and where their cutoff point
Right.
is. So what's their cutoff in terms of being an ally, right? In quotes, like,
Right.
where's their cutoff? And I find that really interesting to me too. And it also sometimes goes the other way, because I had one woman who was like, I thought I knew where you stood on Black issues. I thought you were unapologetic something. And I don't even know what I said, but it just wasn't black enough for her, so it kind of offended her. So you can't win either way. But I think one of the things that you mentioned was talking about or feeling like having repeated interactions with the same people and thinking that there might be bias there.
To my knowledge, I never encountered this type of situation before where I felt like every time I speak to this particular person who has no knowledge of my background or my experience at all, every time I talk to this person, they immediately disagree with what I'm saying. And in some cases, or even if it's not in conversation, there are some cases where if I've like written up a report or something and included something that came from that person, and that person will question those things, and I'm like, well, I don't know, it came from you. And it's sort of, it's been this experience of it happening too many times to be a coincidence, and finally to the point where I wonder, um, in this particular space, I wonder, do you, to this person, do you think that I don't belong here because I'm black? Do you think I don't belong here because I don't have a degree? Or what is it about me that makes you think that I just stumbled into this and have no idea what I'm doing, right? So I don't know how to deal with it because I'm just sort of coming to terms with the fact that it's more than just a fluke, and it's actually a chronic issue. And it's and I wonder. A friend of mine said something something that was really helpful actually the other day. We were discussing this, and she said, she's a white woman, so she said, you know, as a white woman, I'm hearing you talk about this, and the only thing that I can even come close to comparing it to is sexism. So I'm thinking, if this was me and this was a man that was treating me like this, would I think he was being sexist? And the answer is absolutely yes. So I think I think that helped me sort of confirm my assumptions, and also it makes me it makes me think about how we always instinctively know, and how it's hard to explain that knowing to other people who may not have to ever encounter it, but we always know when people are
I
treating us
agree.
differently because of our
Yes.
race. So, and I think in this case, this is like a very um, appears to be very liberal and open and, you know, all that type person. So I feel like it took me longer um, to sort of figure it
To
out.
spot it.
Yeah, but still, you know, you always know.
You always know, and you know what that makes me think of? Our kids. So yeah, you always know. I think for so long we've been conditioned to not call people racist. So the way that your friend can say, well, that's sexist, and then, yeah, of course I would call him out, and I would say that that's sexist
Right.
behavior. We've been so conditioned to not call people racist because it could be so detrimental. But you know what? Or that's the way it's
Mm-hmm.
framed. But I like right I think more than ever right now, and I wasn't always like this. I have just I call it as I experience it,
Right.
right? So I will say, you know, yeah, and for kids, imagine what that's like for a child in a classroom
Mm-hmm.
where their teacher's really nice to them, really nice to their parents, but there's something not right, and the kid just doesn't know how to explain
Right.
what's not right, right? But it maybe they're so it's coming out in their behavior, or it's coming out in other ways because they just they can't articulate the same way, the same problems we have, right? Or we're so we don't want to say it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the words to say it. So I think for me, more than ever right now, the where I'm at is there is no, I'm not sure. Like if I'm going through that and I'm having that experience, yeah, that person is racist. I want nothing to do with them, and I'm gonna figure out a way to either call them on it, or not have to work with her.
Right.
So before in my last job, I had an experience with someone who I didn't like from the get-go, but there wasn't, I mean, there's always a reason why you don't like someone, right? And I just knew, just like I just knew by talking to her and just by our interactions that there was a problem there, right? And it just became bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it was just obvious. But I was still on I was on my journey to being able to say that, and I think the last straw for me was being in a room with her, looking at images of Black women, some with nail polish on their fingers, some without, where she made a comparison to one of the Black women who didn't have nail polish as, oh, this could be my cleaner. Like, it just, whatever it was just such a bizarre thing about appearance and being Black, and then equating that to like being a domestic, like a cleaner, and how her cleaner, when she wears nail polish, this is what her cleaner looks like on a Sunday. She was all levels of problematic, right? But yeah, and I mean, that problem resolved itself because we kind of, there was like a mass layoff, so that was okay. But but I mean, had I had to stay in that environment, I think at that point where I was at just then, it would have, like, something would have had to have happened, right? And you can't, I don't think you can let people go on things like that.
Right.
You have to call it out. And really, part of my frustration right now is with people who claim to be sympathetic, but who don't hold anyone to account.
Right.
So if you've got racist people in your family, you need to hold them to account. If you're married to someone who's racist, you need to hold them to account. Like, you can't just let these things slide, because that's how it becomes repetitive. And it's hard. And that's what we have to do. Right. That's why our blood pressure is so high, right? Like, we have to, and that's exactly, as Black people.
Part of my intention with the original question or subject is just like, what damage are we doing to ourselves and to our health by being these people that are the go-tos for the answers, and also still being in the world where we have to deal with being mistreated because we're Black. It's sort of just everything's piling up on top of us.
Yeah, we are damaging our health, right? And Black women, our health outcomes are not great. And a lot of that is stress related, right? Like, so much of that is stress related, and we carry those burdens for everything. So I don't know. I don't have the answer. I just know that for me, and also, I mean, this is also part of my anxiety. Like, when I talk to you about being like, I'm feeling stressed right now, and for the last year and until March, so a year and a half, I would have been working in an environment where my focus is purely Black issues, where I'm allowed to talk about racism, I'm allowed to talk about oppression, I'm allowed to talk about, like, all these issues, and talk about how racist everything is around you, and you can talk and express that. And so I'm allowed to do all of that, but that ends in March. So part of me is like, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to go back into, like, a normal work environment? I'm not going to be able to do it. Right? So there's all this panic. And really, legitimately, there's a lot of panic, because I'm like, what am I going to do when I cannot
You want to be somewhere where you can
or talk about race?
Yeah.
So, and that's part of what keeps you sane. And then when you have to hold it in and be like, oh, I'm going through this, and it's just not, and you have to keep it to yourself, or you have to talk in hushed tones in the bathroom or in the kitchen, like, that's, nobody wants to work in an environment like that. No. Or if you're in a work environment where, if you're talking to your Black colleague and you're kind of huddled chatting about something, and everyone's looking to see what you're talking about. Right. Like, that's just,
I hope they're not ganging up on us. Yeah.
If you enjoy listening to the show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you get automatic updates of new episodes every Tuesday. Also, leave a review and let other people know what you think of the show. Don't forget to follow Woke Mommy Chatter at Woke Mommy on Twitter, on Instagram, and follow along on Facebook at Woke Mommy Chatter. Be sure to visit the Woke Mommy Chatter website at www.wokemommychatter.com to help support the production of the podcast.
Thanks for listening to Woke Mommy Chatter.